Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips. Give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. I'm Annie Yorty, your host for today, and we are going to be discussing how to strengthen your marriage as you care for a child with disabilities. And our guests today are Dr. Todd and Kristen Evans. So I want to give you a little bit of background on them, and then we will get started with our conversation. Todd and Kristen are celebrating 22 years of marriage. They are award-winning authors, speakers, and special needs parents. They co-authored their new book, How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. They both earned their master's in Christian Educational Ministries at Wheaton College in Illinois and have served together in full-time ministry in church, camping, and retreat settings. Todd received his PhD from Vanderbilt University's School of Engineering, and he currently manages his own business. Kristen earned her master's in social work from the University of Tennessee and is a licensed master social worker experienced in couples, child and family, substance abuse, and crisis counseling. They enjoy traveling and the outdoors together. Welcome, Todd and Kristen. I am so glad to have you here today.
Hi, Annie.
Thanks, Annie.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. I think you will bring a lot to the table for our listeners today. I myself am a mom of a child with Down syndrome who is now grown. I homeschooled her for many years, and I know firsthand how not just parenting a child with a disability, but also homeschooling can add a great deal of stress to a marriage if we're not learning to manage all of that well. So I think our audience is just going to really find some nuggets of wisdom today from you two. So thank you again for coming. I would love to have you just tell a little bit about yourselves and why you're so passionate about this topic. And then we'll go into some more specific questions from there.
Yeah, so we got married, both planning to go into ministry, and went to graduate school together. And we started into ministry working at a church, and Todd was a youth pastor. And when our oldest was 3 years old, I became pregnant with our second child, our daughter, Bethany Grace. And pretty early in the pregnancy, we knew something was not quite right. And 2 days before Christmas, genetics told us that she had developed a severe chromosomal deletion called Credy-Shaw syndrome. And we just were taken aback and basically devastated to be told that. She wasn't supposed to survive. They said she'd never walk or talk, have any quality of life. She did survive, and she lived in the NICU 3 months. And then when she came home from the NICU, our lives kind of flipped upside down. Caregiving for her 24 hours a day with her medical and developmental disabilities. And we really began to struggle. We really began to struggle in every single way. In our marriage, emotionally, financially, it just got really bad. And it took stumbling around for years for us to learn how to thrive, both as special needs parents and as a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. Todd, do you want to add anything about your, background, your part of the story?
Well, as Kristen said, it was an extremely challenging time, just trying to manage all the day-to-day things. Kristen had her thing she was focused on with helping with our daughter, and I had trying to work full time and trying to keep up with our finances and things like that. And really, it was just hard to find time to build our marriage, to build into each other, and we just let that go, just neglected it. And it was only with significant effort and intention that we were able to kind of build it back to something amazing at this point, really. But it took a long time, many, many years, as Kristen said. But we just don't want to see couples just floundering out there because it is easy to give up. We were so close to giving up ourselves. So that's what we're really passionate about, is trying to get just a few of these ideas, a couple of these tools, because we really believe that if we can help couples to make one step in the right direction, that their own care and love that brought them together and relying upon God is going to bring them forward to something much more beautiful and wonderful. And so that's what we really passionate about, is trying to just help get couples one step on this journey further.
Amen. I remember when I came home with my daughter from when she was born, and talk about hitting the ground running. There was just a gazillion things to do, not the least of which was just my expectations and, my shock at the diagnosis of Down syndrome. So there's a lot emotionally and a lot physically that you're doing to care for your child and to learn all the new things you need to learn. So it certainly is a stressful time, but you have said in your book that these stressful times, these moments of crisis or the struggles that we encounter are actually an avenue or an opportunity to get closer to one another, to deepen that marriage relationship. So I'd love to hear about that, because that most of us don't necessarily think of it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of a rewiring or in a different way of thinking through this. And we can only really say this by having experienced it and seen it firsthand. But the idea is that these stressful moments, they can either break you or build you. And many couples, they let them break them. They don't reach out together. They don't reach out to God, to try to get through them. But those that do reach toward each other and work to build the marriage, they end up at a stronger place. That their relationship is stronger. They have more satisfaction in their marriage because they've worked through all these hard things together. They've learned the skills and the nuances and the aspects of coming together and doing something really challenging. And it just helps to build up into something new and amazing that otherwise may not have been there.
Yeah, the I know when I first had Alyssa, my daughter, and I would just try to handle everything on my own. And Jeff, my husband, was going to work, and we didn't pull together at first, and it was a lot of groping around trying to find our way. So I can see where once you get that different mindset, things are going to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear the 80% statistic that couples who have one child with special needs divorce. And that made us feel hopeless. We had heard that. We said, what's the point? But even though, we felt kind of hopeless, we said, we're going to give it one more chance. And as we were researching for the book, I just kept reading journal article after journal article that just proved that statistic isn't true. And it came from a news report that actually was not based in fact. And so then it just, grew in strength and just got spread around. But what we found is the research is focusing more on, yes, you have to manage higher levels of stress. You have to learn new coping skills and use more coping skills and different coping skills to manage the stress and to build your marriage. But when you do achieve this more intimate and deeper relationship that wouldn't be possible any other way. So we just want to give couples hope.
Well, we all need that hope, don't we? And we forget sometimes that we're not in this alone. We have God who is guiding us and empowering us as parents. So that's important. And we have other people like you guys who will share the information that you've learned along your journey, so that we can take that and run with it in our own lives. So speaking of that, we all know the stress of having a child with a disability, and you have some suggestions, I believe, for some very concrete ways that we can go ahead and manage that stress as a couple, that we can actually stay together in managing that stress.
Yeah, so one of the biggest factors in managing stress as special needs parents and as a family and a couple is actually building more social support around. And that's not what automatically comes to mind when we think managing and coping with stress, but it's actually one of the biggest factors that helps make these couples resilient. And that might look like finding someone who could provide respite for 2 hours, a support group, whether in person or online, which provides so many different ways to lower stress, and a faith community, and building friendships, whether maybe just on the phone with other special needs parents. All of those ways of support help reduce stress. And of course, there's other practical coping skills that most parents never even think about or have to learn, like progressive muscle relaxation and mindfulness-based stress reduction. Those, I learned about this when Beth and Grace was young, because I just could not manage the stress, lower my anxiety. And I began to learn about what mindfulness is, which is basically being in the present moment. So as a couple, that might look like, your spouse comes home, you've got this 2 minutes, you can interact and say, how was your day? Well, a lot of times we do that and we don't really listen. We're cooking, or we're texting, or the kids are screaming, and all those things are going on and we're not really being mindful. So we talk in the book about mindful listening, which is stopping everything else, putting everything down, and full attention on one another. And that might seem like a little thing that's really simple, but it can actually make a big, big difference.
I can very much relate to that idea, that the concept of multitasking. As moms, we're great at that. And when I'm homeschooling and my husband comes home from work, there's still a million things to do. Sometimes, the kids have been difficult or didn't get their work done, and we're still trying to finish that up. But I could, in my own situation, I would find myself just continuing on working with the homeschool things and my tasks, and not really stopping to focus on that moment when he came in the door, take the time to reconnect, and to move forward into the rest of the day together. And I think the way I like to think about it is putting boundaries on our homeschooling or our parenting or whatever. We have to just press the pause button and take that time out with one another, right? So Todd, you probably have, a somewhat different perspective as a father in this situation, where you may be the one coming home into the chaos that we often have in our homes. And so what's your perspective on that when you come in, and what does it do for you and in your relationship with Kristen when you come in and have that attention put on your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say anything other than it feels great, that your spouse is willing to take the time and to see you. One thing that's that you realize with it, our interactions are so precious. We have so many things that we're doing all the time, whether it's the medical care, all the other pieces, that those times we do have are precious. And if we're multitasking or thinking about other things in the middle of them, it just devalues those moments. So to be able to come home and Kristen to stop things and to say hi or to give me a kiss or something, those are amazing. It just brightens my day if I've had a rough day out. By the same token, I know that she's had a rough day at home, that as many of your audience probably can identify with. When you're home all day and doing the homeschooling and all the stuff around the house, you don't get away. And so I try to be cognizant of that when I come through the door, and kind of reciprocate the same thing, that I don't necessarily have to talk about my day. I want to give her full attention as well. I try to lay things down quickly, or if I need to, if my feet are killing me, I need to get my shoes off, I'll say, hey, just give me 1 second, I want to spend some time with you, I'll be right back, and just take care of whatever those needs are that are going to be distracting me so that I can focus on her. So some days I really need her to listen and share my day, and she's got that for me. Other days she's had a rough day at home and needs me to listen to her. So it's kind of when we're able to give that direct attention to each other, and we're able to realize what the other person needs more easily after building up and lots of practice of doing that every day.
Mm-hmm. That's great to hear. We as moms sometimes forget about that. And it's just those little things. It doesn't have to be a super long amount of time, but we do need to pause and remember that our first relationship is with our husband. And so let me just turn to another topic that I know I've felt in myself, and I've talked to other parents who feel this as well often. When you have a child with some kind of diagnosis, whether you knew it before birth or at birth, or maybe it even came along later in life, we sometimes feel just a sense of loss because our expectation was something different. And we may need to grieve that. I know I have, and it's at different points in life, it comes back again. And sometimes it has to do with when we're around other people who have typically developing children. We notice the differences, and it hits us all over again. Can you just talk a little bit about those emotional needs that we have and how we can support one another and build each other up in our marriages that way?
Yeah, so I'd say this is one of the areas that can have a very significant impact on the marriage relationship, and it certainly did ours. We did not understand what was going on, and it nearly ripped our marriage apart. We thought there was just this acute grief. We were devastated when we got the official diagnosis. We grieved together. We're not going to have a healthy, typical daughter. And we kind of went through that acute grief. Well, after that, our grief journeys diverged. And Todd was seemingly over it. And he had grieved. He had moved on. And I thought something was wrong with me because I kept having these waves of grief. I would go to doctor's appointments with Beth, see a healthy baby, and it would just hit me. And certain things like that, milestones, of course she wasn't hitting. And then other times I a wave of either anger or sadness would hit me, and I wouldn't know why. And we really didn't understand what this was doing to our marriage, because Todd was like, we've grieved, let's move on. Like, we fully accepted it. Well, it's a journey of continual acceptance and allowing ourselves to grieve each time. And it was really a couple of years ago, researching for the book, we had an aha moment of, oh, this is what was going on. Special needs parents experience a different type of grief than, the classic 5 stages that you think about when you lose a child. And so it's called chronic sorrow. Throughout our children's lives, we will continually go through, it's called a living loss. And so we did not understand this about each other, that research shows, not always, but a lot of times the moms experience it much more intense for longer, more waves of grief. Your probably spouses are not going to be in the same cycle or the same emotion of grief. And what we had to learn was we're not going to have the same experience of grief. And that's okay. That's expected. We have to learn how to support one another in that grief throughout our daughter's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's grief is a huge topic among us parents that are raising children with disabilities. But Todd, I don't want to leave you out. I'd love to hear some of your perspective, because I can totally identify with Kristen as a woman. But I think she mentioned, and it's true, that men handle things differently in terms of their emotions.
Yeah, definitely. For myself, I was in that camp of, like she said, we kind of went through the acute grief process. And at that point, my responsibilities for my family overrode anything else I felt, is what I felt at the time. That all I had time for was to take care of my daughter and the machines and all the other caregiving aspects that I had, plus the other things for work and those kind of things. And so in my mind, it was like, I don't have time for grief. I can't think about this. That's an emotion that just has to go away. And as I've learned later, and as I hear from others, that emotion doesn't just go away. It still comes up, and often if you try to push it away, it comes up stronger and stronger, and it can be overwhelming. And when it does that, it becomes this negative force that is just kind of behind the scenes, beneath the surface, and impacts every relationship you're in, whether it's at work and definitely at home, when you aren't able to share that grief. So it really takes some effort, on my part, to be willing to share that grief. It's not easy for me. Even today, it's not easy for me. It definitely wasn't when we first were going through all these things. And so really it's making a choice to let your spouse in, to share that grief, making the choice to let yourself feel that, even if rarely you may feel bad for a moment, but that's part of the process and part of the healing that can be there to help you. And oftentimes your spouse can be that person if you're willing to share that with them.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking through kind of these generational things, and I might be at our daughter's bed at night, putting her to bed, tucking her in, doing all the things that you would do with a 2 or 3 year old, and she's 14.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, it looks like maybe Todd was having some technical difficulties, but he did make some awesome points that, we do sometimes want to compartmentalize our emotions and see if we can just put them away for a time. And like he said, I too have learned that they don't just go away. They come out in one way or another. So, so I really appreciated what Todd was saying there about trying to take the time and be intentional about talking about the feelings that you're having, that you need to take that time together so each spouse knows what the other one's experiencing, which does bring us to the topic of communication, which is huge for any marriage, of course. But I think when we are busy with whatever the issues are with our children or with homeschooling, sometimes the communication gets to be just that top level of let's take care of the business and move on. So I bet you have some strategies that can help us to become better communicators with one another so that we are aware of one another and that we can know how to support each other in that way.
Yeah, we definitely fell into that ending up in just what we would call a business partnership. It was who's taking Bethany to all her appointments today, or PTOT, who's doing this, who's doing that, what nurse are we going to have today? And there was little time left over, especially when there were discussions that needed to happen that were very stressful, maybe about a higher level of care or financial problems. And it can become easy for special needs parents to get stuck in these conversations about all our children's additional needs and never get to more relationship conversations that are more intimate. And so one of the skills we talk about in the book is setting a daily check-in time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, same time of day. Try to stick to it, guard that time, and make it precious. Can go a long way in building trust and intimacy in your marriage, because that time has nothing to do with the care needs of the kids. It is only, how are you doing and what do you need, and supporting one another. And once we started to do that, we began to build a level of trust back. And we knew that no matter what was going on, we were going to have that time to check in. It might be at lunchtime. It might be after the kids are in bed. But that's one of the major skills these couples have to build in.
Yeah. I think I remember I would just call my husband at work, in the middle of the day, just to have a moment of conversation. But that probably, I don't think that's enough. I'm sure, just a little bit on the phone, it would be best done in person, obviously. So Todd, what can you add to that in terms of just the communication, like we know to set aside that time? And how do you as a husband, or do you recommend, what do you need as a husband to be able to talk about with your wife?
I'm sorry, Annie, could you please repeat that? It cut out on me. I didn't hear your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. We're just talking about specifically, like, when you have this time together, it's not selfish to make it about you. And then how can each spouse just be very intentional about discussing and digging in a little bit to those deeper subjects?
Well, the first part is what we already said, is to give full attention, to not be distracted by other things. That already communicates right out from the start that I'm focused on you, you're important, and you're the focus, and we are the focus right now. So that's the first step that you got to do, to communicate and to be able to value that time. The other thing that we've kind of looked at and kind of realized in our own life is the different types of conversations that we have. And these things take practice, but we realize there's very different types of conversations you have with your spouse. Sometimes it's the informational of this is going on, that's going on, you need to be here this time. And it's easy to drift into those kind of conversations like that. Who's doing what? And those deeper conversations can't happen when you have those more shallow ones. The shallow ones, I'll call them shallow, but they're very important too. But those are the ones that will dominate the time if you do not focus on the others. So it's oftentimes just saying, hey, I know we need to talk about this particular topic or this going on. We'll get back to that and we'll look at that. But tell me, what are you feeling today? I found those simple phrases. I'm not very good with asking about emotions or about things like that, as Kristen laughs in the background there. So I've had to learn these phrases literally and practice them and do them to be able to have better conversations. And it's not because I don't feel those things. It's just because I'm not very good at expressing them. So it sounds kind of silly, but those simple questions of how are you feeling? As simple and rote as that sounds, I truly mean it when I ask that question, but it's something that I have to remember to say. It's not natural for me always to say those things. tell me what's going on. Just those conversation pieces that you kind of learn in Conversation 101. They really are the foundations of having a good conversation. And really, if you have those couple of things in there, the conversation usually picks up, and it's easy to start sharing at that deeper level once you get past those, kind of beginning pieces that those kind of phrases can help you to get into.
Yeah. You would think, since we've been talking for many, many years of our lives, we would be pretty good at it, but communication is different from just talking. So we need to learn new skills with communication and learn to be intentional about asking maybe a little bit more of a probing question and being ready to listen. And then maybe having a follow-up question in mind. So that really does make such a huge difference in a marriage relationship. I agree with that. So I think it was Kristen earlier touched on the topic of building a community of support. And as homeschoolers, most of us seek that type of community for our homeschooling journey. And we will often join homeschool groups that where we find like-minded people who can support us in our homeschooling adventure. And we can also do the same thing in our journey of raising a child with a disability. Can you talk a little bit more about what this community looks like, and how do you find them, and how big does this community have to be?
Well, as special needs parents, we can very quickly become isolated. And I'd say that's what happened to us when our daughter came home. And there's several reasons, especially if you're homeschooling, you're home all day. If you have a child with a disability, you're off at appointments or in the hospital. And it can begin to feel like I don't have the time or the energy to form relationships and to talk to people. Nobody understands what I'm going through. And it may be difficult to find someone who can take care of your child so you can actually go connect with people. And so there's all these reasons that we can become isolated. So what I say is it may take a lot of extra time and energy that you don't have, but it's so critical. And maybe you can't make it to a support group for other special needs parents, but there's support groups online. So there's no magical formula to getting this social support. It's really a combination of just trying to build in pieces of support in different ways. You don't have to attend a church with a special needs ministry. A parent who has a child with disabilities can go a long way in helping support you emotionally, helping you see your situation differently, learning resources. And so I just say, take little steps to building more social support, whatever that looks like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And definitely. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, and oftentimes it's just in the world around you, and you don't think to reach out. I mean, that's one thing we found is that, you know what? All these therapies we go to in the waiting room, there's other parents and special needs parents there, special needs kids there. And oftentimes all we got to do is say hi and introduce ourselves, and it can start an amazing relationship. Or other situations you find the doctor's office or Special Olympics or anything like that. You find the connections, and you have to oftentimes step out because the other parent's very similar to you. They're exhausted, they're tired, they're probably just sitting there trying to get those few minutes of relaxation while their child's getting therapy or something. But when you reach out to them and they reciprocate, you find that there's this like-minded person there, and it gives you energy that you didn't know was there because you're coming out of isolation, you're talking to someone else and finding that connection. So it can be very simple like that. There can be more formal things like Chris was saying, a support group. For me, I just joined a support group for dads this last month. Been looking for something for a long time to connect with other dads on, and I've been so busy it's hard to reach out and do it. But I was finally able to connect with this group, and it's a national group, so they have dads groups all over the country and things with that Special Fathers Network. And there's resources like that are out there, and it takes a little bit of time and energy to find them, but what you get back in energy and encouragement is so much more powerful and so much more uplifting than where you would be just by trying to take that few extra minutes break to yourself. So definitely reach out to find a group, find someone, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a friend, whether it's a support group like that, but just find something out there, because it does make a huge, huge difference in your life.
Well, I'll just add a little something to that from the homeschooling perspective. I have definitely benefited from in-person support groups over the years. I have also taken advantage of the online opportunities, because so often as parents of children with disabilities, we need to know other people have walked this road before us. And we have questions that the answers, not everyone can answer. But if you can get connected in some way with one of these groups, then you have people that you can ask questions and hear their stories and learn tips and tricks from them. But also, I would just mention that it takes a degree of humility to admit that you need that kind of help. So we do need to just humble ourselves and put ourselves out there. It's a risk too, because somebody might just say no or not give us the help that we need. But it's best if we can just take that risk and put ourselves out there, admit our need for help. This does not all depend on me as a mom or you as a dad, or, that we have, God does put supports in our lives if we will reach out and take hold of them and ask for the help and be willing to receive it. As a homeschool mom, when I was in groups, I would try to connect. There's usually at least one other family there that might have a child with a disability. And you don't need a huge group of people to connect with to get that feeling of support. But do reach out there, and don't feel like you have to do everything like every other parent is doing in the homeschool group. Be content with where you're at and just connect with those people that have similar needs. And you'll find that you can really support each other in your journey of homeschooling and parenting in a big way, even like with not just emotionally, but with just some of the physical supports that you might need, sharing babysitting, or, having someone to watch over your child while you have an appointment or something like that. These things, we have to reach out and find that support, or it gets pretty grueling if we don't look for that help. So I appreciate that you've added that concept to the information that you're giving in your book, Todd and Kristen. That's because that's really important. And we often do feel like the Lone Ranger, when we're out there, and we don't have to. And we can also remember our biggest source of support is God himself. Mm-hmm. He's not just some distant up there in the sky being. He's close and personal, and he knows all your needs. So when you need that support, start with him, and then he'll direct you to whether he's going to handle that himself with you, or whether he's going to put someone in your life that you can go to. So anyways, we're getting closer to the end, but I know we have a couple other topics to touch on. So there are people in our audience who may not have children with disabilities, or maybe their needs are less severe or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about how those those families could support people that they know who are raising children with disabilities?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is just kind of know broadly that those parents are probably really stressed. Having kids is stressful. Homeschooling is, I imagine, very stressful. But having a child with an additional need adds a whole nother layer of stress and loneliness. So I would just say make an extra effort to reach out. Just to say, hey, I'm here, I'm a listening ear, and offer, can I do anything to help? Asking questions is a great way to let other parents know you care. Asking questions is better than giving advice, because we get lots of advice.
Mm-hmm.
And but just anything you can do to help take that stress off, if you're able to, whether, hey, can I watch your child for an hour so that you can take a nap, or just some kind of way to offer some way to lower that stress level. And for married couples who have a child with a disability, the thing that they need the most is often the hardest to get, which is time alone together. Whether that's even just on the porch together, with their child being taken care of in the house, So any little thing you can do makes a big, big difference, especially just letting that parent know, they're handling a little bit more and you're there for them.
Mm-hmm. That's those are some good pieces of advice. I appreciate what you said about giving advice versus just asking questions. And I've noticed that people are often afraid to ask anything. They worry about maybe that they might offend you with their question. But I think in my experience, I have appreciated people who have specifically just come and opened up the topic with me and talked about it freely. It's, as a parent of a child with a disability, we do hear a lot of kind of off the wall things sometimes, but we can learn to just let that go and appreciate that the person is sincerely wanting to know, wanting to enter into your situation, and that they might be able to help in some way. And in the homeschool community, I will mention as well that in our support groups, we have children of all ages, usually up through high school. And that's a perfect place to find someone, maybe a teenager who's very responsible, who could maybe come over. You might just hire them as a mother's helper to be there while you're there, even if you aren't sure you could leave, but they could be there and handle some of the things while you're at home. Or maybe you, like you said, sit on the porch with your husband for an hour while the mother's helper comes and just holds down the fort for a few minutes for you to have some time together once a week. These are some things to consider to help yourself find that greater intimacy and strength in your marriage. Todd, do you have anything more? I didn't mean to leave you out on this subject. Do you have anything more to add?
No, I really agreed with those things. It's definitely knowing that you care is one of the biggest things people can offer to us, and really practical things. Maybe this is more my male side that if you're offering to help with something practical in our life, whether it's can I come over and help mow the yard or pick up some groceries for you. Those mean a lot. But the other thing I would say to those people reaching out to the family, like you were saying, and wanting to express interest, to help, things like that, is we're probably going to reject you the first 2 or 3 times because we've been hurt by people oftentimes, not often intentional, but just people feel like they care, they reach out, and we kind of like, oh, somebody cares, and we reach out and reciprocate, and then they just don't ever come back, or they realize, oh, this is more than I can handle, this family or whatever's going on, and they're messy. It's hard to I'm not sure I can deal with this. They probably don't intentionally think that, but that's what we've seen oftentimes for people that come around us, that they're like, their child's not normal. I don't want to be around that, just and so when you reach out, we have a hardened shell is I guess a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to say, no, don't worry about it. We're good. Appreciate it. But we're good. Because we've learned to be self-sufficient and to get through these things. But keep pushing through, keep asking. And once you do that 3 or 4 times, then we might be likely to respond back and say, yeah, you know what? That really would be helpful, if you could just pick up some milk, and bananas for us on your way and just drop them off. It's been a rough day and I just can't make it out. That really means a lot to us. So don't be hurt when we might reject you the first time or two. It's really a sign that we desperately need your presence, your help, your care.
Yeah, that's so true. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of effort, but it's those little things that do mean a lot. And yeah, it's true what you said, Todd, about just establishing that trust, because as you mentioned, we have been burned sometimes, and we need to build that up. This is our child, and we are very protective. So, but I do appreciate and have learned to ask for help and to receive it. And that's, from someone who is typically on the helping end of things, it's a little hard to be in the other position, but it's also a huge blessing when you do receive that and you allow yourself to be ministered to in that way. So I'll just encourage us moms and dads to accept the help when it comes our way, when God provides that. Well, we're winding down a little bit. You, Kristen, are a professional counselor, and so there may be parents who are thinking, we're at the breaking point in our marriage. Can you just give some information about parents who may be reluctant to go and seek that professional help, to go that extra step? See, how could they experience something different if they were open to some professional help?
Yeah, so I'll say that a lot of times as couples, we're ashamed that we're struggling in our marriages. But I just want to normalize that marriage is hard in general. If you have a child with disabilities and you're struggling, you're part of the higher statistic of us that are struggling. And there's nothing wrong with you as parents or a husband and wife. It makes sense you're struggling with all the stressors you're dealing with. Most couples wait years to go for counseling. I would say if you think you might benefit from it, go as soon as possible. Because as a special needs parent, at the very minimum, it can help you learn stress coping skills and process your grief together at the very minimum, and then help you grow stronger so that you can weather these stressors. And if you're a special needs parent and you're struggling with your mental health, like I did, either anxiety, depression, 1 in 5 parents who have a child with medical conditions meets the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. There's nothing wrong with you. I thought there was something wrong with me. There's not. You're the 1 in 3, which I think that statistic is actually low. And that is struggling with mental health. So I would say go sooner than later. Go as soon as you can. Because ultimately, the healthier you are as a parent and as a couple, the better you're going to be able to care for your child, and the healthier your child's going to be. Because I think we feel like it's selfish to take the time to go to marriage counseling or to go to mental health counseling. We don't have time because if I didn't spend that time on myself, I could do this other thing for my child. But ultimately, we have to be healthy in order to be the best parents.
Yeah, that's our marriage relationship does have to come first in the hierarchy of relationships in our lives. That's God ordained. The children will fare better under a healthy relationship between the husband and wife. And so I would just echo that. Don't delay. Don't put it off. Make it the priority, because you want to have that long and satisfying life with your spouse. So I just really encourage you to do that. We are quickly running out of time here, but I want to just let you tell people about how they can connect with you. I know that you have a website, disabilityparenting.com, and you can see that on the bottom of the screen for our listeners there. That's one place to connect with you, but tell us about your other resources and things like that, please.
Yeah, so we have a lot of resources on our site, free resources you can download, including our book that Baker Books has provided. You can actually read for free the first chapter. And then lots and lots of links to resources, everything from respite to online support groups, mental health resources. We just like to provide as much for free as possible. We're also on Instagram, Disability Parenting, and we like to put out helpful posts there about faith, mental health, and marriage. And those are the two main places you can find us. We would love to hear from listeners.
Okay, so I have had the privilege of seeing your book, which I will fully endorse here. And Todd, here's what I noticed about it. It's a little bit like a handbook. And maybe, Todd, you could tell a little bit about how the book does let you interact with these different topics and subjects that we need to deal with as parents. I'm going to put onto the screen a picture of the book now too, while you talk about that, please, Todd.
Sure. Yeah, the book, we really saw it, like, as you said, a handbook for your marriage. We kind of imagined it as couples like us. We don't have time to sit down and read a whole book. We have these crisis moments where we need to address something specific and look at it. And so when you look at a chapter, you might have a chapter on communication, like we talked about, that you can say, okay, I need better communication, or we're having struggles with this. Let's jump over to that chapter, go through it. And every chapter we put in there just some practical ways that you can implement it into your own life, because we believe it's so important that you actually do the things. So every chapter has a section in it where you can actually apply that skill to your life and to do it, and you and your spouse go through it together. And we really believe if you start doing that, you'll see these positive moments happen in your marriage, and it'll encourage you to keep looking at more. So really there's a number of skills in there. You can jump in at any point, read that chapter. Some of the skills build on each other, but all of them can also be looked at independently. So that's really our goal, was to provide something that you could just jump into. We know you can't handle it all right now, but we believe that as you build each skill, you're going to start having more time, more space in your life to try the other skills too. They just really connect well with one another, and you find that as you build one thing in your life, just time management, for instance, we have a whole chapter on kind of the practicalities of how you do that. Then you discover, okay, now that I'm managing my time better, I have more time to even think about respite now, and spending time with my spouse, where I didn't have that before. And it's very similar throughout the book that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting book because it is like a handbook that we don't need to race through, that we can go through and take our time to just try to fully apply those lessons that you have. It's very practical. And I think that we as parents can appreciate that. And I think our listeners will really find something to grab hold of and improve and strengthen their own marriages as they parent their children with disabilities. So with that, I think it's time to wrap up today. I want to thank you both, Todd and Kristen, for taking the time to come here today and just share with the audience about these important and relevant skills that we need to just keep our marriages strong. And I want to just encourage our listeners to go to your website to check out your resources there. And as I said, I think the book is also very helpful. So go and check all those things out as you and see how it can help you as you homeschool your children with disabilities. Now, in our next episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations, we will be discussing parenting with patience, expert advice on managing challenging child behavior. Until then, take care and God bless. I look forward to seeing you next time.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com